back to It's All Her, the podcast. I'm your host, Jordy Lucas. I'm the founder and editor at It's All Her. I was an actress in a previous life and I'm a mum to a toddler. I've got a lot going on and I have a passion for helping women live simpler, better lives. For the latest in lifestyle and entertainment news, head to itsallher.com. Well, we have a bonus episode for you this week, and today I am chatting with Australian cricketer Holly Ferling. Holly made her debut for Australia at just 17 years of age and has also carved out a pretty impressive career for herself as a cricket commentator on Channel 7. We talk about the ups and downs of her life, the incredible pay gap between women and men's sport, and much more. But I start off by asking Holly where her love affair with sport, and in particular cricket, began.
It's quite funny the way that women's sport has come along and where cricket's got to now. I'm really proud to have been a part of it. But growing up, I played a lot of netball, a lot of touch football, and cricket was kind of the last sport that I got into when I was 12. So if you had have told me back then that I'd be playing semi-professionally for something, I would have thought I'd be 100% playing for the Queensland Firebirds.
Okay.
Playing netball. So I fell into cricket. I was really, my brother played it's a traditional story across a lot of them, but I used to take a fold-out chair and a book and I'd read watching him play. I had no interest in cricket whatsoever. You were just sitting and waiting for the batting innings so that we could go play on the playground pretty much. But I used to go along to my brother's club trainings and bowl to the boys, and never really saw cricket as a sport for girls because I never saw any girls playing. And it wasn't on TV. Like you watch Brett Lee and Ricky Ponting on TV and that was kind of it. And then I actually had a girl at touch football ask me to come trial for a schoolgirls team and called my PE teacher to say, hey, I'm going to miss school for these trials. And he said, I didn't think you'd be interested, but sure enough, go along. It ended up being that he was going to be my A grade captain in the men's comp just a few years later. Within 2 months made the state team. So well and truly fell into it. And I think if that girl hadn't have mentioned cricket to me, I don't think I'd be here.
It's amazing how just little things can spark such a different chain of events in your life, isn't it?
Hindsight is really wonderful, and it's sometimes you don't see the thread between the dots. Not until you look back that you kind of go, okay, that actually makes sense as to why I experienced that or why I chose to go down that path. But I count myself really, really lucky that happened for me and that I actually fell into something that I love, because I was from the country. And so you try everything when you're out in the country, because the netball teams, the touch football team, is the soccer team, like everyone's doing everything pretty much. So I was really lucky to find the thing that I'm good at, or the thing that I love right then.
And then you went on to debut for Australia at just 17 years of age. So I'm imagining that you've obviously got quite supportive parents to have their 17-year-old come over. And were you playing, is it India that you debuted? Like, that's incredible.
It was quite a funny period. I'd been playing for the Queensland Fire, so our WNCL team, for 3 months, I think, by the stage I got the call. And it was Boxing Day. And I remember the call from the selector went along the lines of, are you sitting down? And I assumed that was like, oh, are you like at lunch or with your family? And I said, no, I'm fine. And they're like, no, take a seat. And I was like, this is really weird. And because I thought it was someone who'd been a team manager of a team I'd been in. So I thought I'd forgotten paperwork or something. And sure enough, got told I was going away with the Aussie team to India. And I remember sitting there afterwards, like it took me a couple of minutes to compose myself to go like, did that just happen? And then my second thought was then, how am I going to handle spice? Because I can't handle pepper on my steak.
Neither can I.
And how on earth am I going to go over and eat all these amazing curries and whatnot? I went out and told my parents, and I think they were in shock as well. They had no idea what was going on either. So I came back loving curry. That's
oh wow, okay.
I ended up missing the first 4 weeks of year 12 to go to a World Cup. Came back a World Cup winner, and worked out that I do like curry. Just if the spice is there, it's got to be there for a purpose. So,
what was that experience like as a 17-year-old flying overseas to represent the country. I can only imagine how much pressure you must have felt.
I don't know if it was pressure. I think it was just when you're young and when it's your first tour, you're actually in this really protective bubble, and you don't realize at the time. Everything's really new and shiny, and I actually kind of wish sometimes, because I was so young when I made my debut, I kind of wish that I had, I guess, the perspective that I do now, and kind of had my eyes open a little bit more.
Okay.
Because there's so many details that I wish that I had have been absorbing and going along with, but because everything's just new, you're just trying to take in as much as possible. But I think when it's your first year, you're an unknown, so you don't have the same expectation on yourself as you do, say, in the middle of your career where I am now. And the other thing too is the opposition doesn't know you, so it's kind of this nice little merger of not having so much pressure on you, and just being able to be free and just do what you do. And that's really what they provided me when I was over there. I debuted just in case someone got injured, and sure enough, Pez got injured not long after that, and so I was kind of filling her role until she was fit again. So it was the wildest experience I've ever had, and to go to somewhere like India. I had been to Sri Lanka just before that on a training camp, but to have your first experience with the Australian team being something so they talk about India being an assault on the senses, and it is, because it's so different to what we experience here in Australia. The traffic, like there's just cars everywhere, there's beeping constantly, and then let alone the food and the adjustment to the cultures as well. But the other thing is they just love their sport, they love their cricket. So you're training and you've got 30 odd people watching you train because they just love cricket, they just love watching people in the nets. So it was so cool, and I think I'm really count myself lucky that my first experience in the Aussie team was over in India to experience that.
What was the transition then to playing back at a domestic level?
I guess it was challenging in the sense that then all of a sudden you're up on a platform where people have seen what you do now. So that second year, everyone talks about the second year being one of the toughest, and it is, because a lot of people are working out how you go about your business, and even more so nowadays when everything's filmed. We've got coders at our game who are piecing together, and I rely on it as well from a playing and even a commentating perspective, actually being able to go through and pull apart how to get batters out and where do they score runs and all of that. So teams are doing that to me as an 18-year-old, and you're having to keep evolving your game and keep trying to stay on top of it. So it was challenging, and I think then the expectation of yourself, not necessarily what anyone else puts on you, but what you put on yourself, that also becomes quite a big thing as well. So now I did find it a bit of a challenge, but I guess the cool thing for me though too was that it was still very new for me. Like I was still this young kid who just moved out of home by then. And being able to play cricket was just, and really this is all within 5 years of me starting the sport.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It was just a complete whirlwind over the years.
So what does a training regime look like for an international cricket player?
I would say now it's busier more than ever. I think when you're younger, and even back then, how far the game has come. So even in the last 5 years, like you look at the WBBL, for example, the game has just shifted and changed so much, and the demands are so much more. And so for now, for me, I'm still at uni, so I've got my last subject. I'm knocking it over at the moment, and I'll be graduating in December, hopefully.
What are you studying?
Journalism and public relations.
Okay, amazing.
Kind of a nice little merger of everything, and I'm always fascinated when things pop up in the media as to how things are developing and how whether it be reporting or how a company's controlling the narrative. But so for me now, we train anywhere between 5 and 6-7 hours a day. You're not necessarily training the whole time, but it's your contact hours because you've got physio, you've got meeting with your specialist coaches, meetings with your sports psych, meetings with your captain. Like, it just ends up being massive, let alone the fact that you're studying or that you're working as well, because a lot of us are working athletes and we have to be with where the contracts currently are. It's exciting how far it's come, but we're still doing that. But then you're also trying to lead a healthy lifestyle and still be performing at your peak. And for me, nutrition has been such an important part. I've had a number of injuries over the years, and making sure that I'm getting what I need right across that period is really important. I use a platform called Macros, and they deliver to my door, and it's great because I just have to chuck it in the microwave for 3 minutes, and then I've finally got my lunch, because I feel like lunch for me is such a nothing meal. Unless you really plan it out, it's not there. So to have something like that supports such a busy lifestyle, I'm all about hacks and being efficient with my time. I'm the sort of person that has a color-coded Google Calendar.
Oh, wow.
And I'm structured to a T. So to have something that's already sorted for me is amazing, let alone something that's actually dietitian approved as well. So I'm lucky that I've got Macros there to help me. But it's the semi-professional era of an athlete is just, it's becoming busier and busier. And I think it'll shift and change and evolve over the years. But I think there's a way that we can transition into professionalism that we do it better than the boys.
Yeah. I was going to bring this up later, but because you touched on the payment, I guess, for female cricketers, and I guess professional women in sport in this country in general, there's a huge gap in payment. And Cricket Australia actually announced that WBBL players will have an increase of 14%, which sounds great, but it really only takes the average payment from about 21,000 to about 24,000. In comparison, a male cricketer, his retainer sits around somewhere between 198,000. So not too big of a gap. When you see something like that in the media, what are your first thoughts?
Yeah, it's actually quite funny because I was in and around some of the chats around when some of these improvements were coming, and it's not just WBBL. We've also got an uplift in our WNCL retainer, which for me that's the golden one. That's the one that we want to keep going up because that's our 12-month contract. WBBL is almost like not a bonus, but it's a bonus kind of competition that we play. It's only for 3 months.
Yeah.
The improvements have been massive, and I think it's a reflection on how far the game has come in 5 years, because had the retainers had stayed the same across that period, we're still on $1,600 a month, which is wild for the amount of hours that everything's kind of shifted and changed to. And this is the battle too that we're facing. We all want to get better. We all want to play for Australia, and we all want to make this the best product in the country and the world.
Yeah.
So we've also got coaches that want that as well. But how do you meet the demands with compensation as well? And there's a lot of arguments about the money that we bring into the sport, all of that kind of stuff. I think it should be equal to the amount of time that you put in. And I think one of the big things that I'm passionate about, we've got a new pay deal coming up and negotiations that'll start soonish. I'm big on protecting the lowest paid player, because we want to ensure that player can compete with those at the highest level. How can our 15th ranked player be able to stand on their own 2 feet against Australian players? I'm really proud of how far the game has come. My first contract was $900, and I was absolutely cheering. And that was
stoked.
I know, right? And that was at a time where states didn't pay their players. Like Queensland was one of the only states that did. So I think it's definitely come, but part of it too is feeling valued as a player within that as well, and knowing that the sacrifices that you're making, sometimes the monetary value isn't actually the thing that it's actually about. It's actually feeling valued within your sport. And I know Cricket Australia is really passionate about it. They came out and said after announcing all those improvements alongside the ACA, our Players Association, they said that there's still a long way to go. And it's awesome to hear that our sporting body is saying the same thing.
Yeah.
But I would love to be in a world where we can be professional. So for me, that's the lowest paid player can earn a living regardless of what state they live in, because obviously Queensland having different living expenses to New South Wales and Victoria.
Yeah.
But if that lowest paid player can make a living and not have to work, then that'd be great. But there's still, I think the best thing about women's sport is that we've still got these stories. We've still got this whole person perspective where we've got lives outside of cricket and outside of our sport. And I think that's what makes us well-rounded people. So my fear alongside the professionalism is ensuring that we don't lose that. So whether it is that we have a day that is blocked out for you to work on, whether it be study, whether it be work experience or just have to work on yourself, I think that's going to be really important moving forward, because we want to ensure that when people finish their careers, they're able to transition into being fully functional adults outside.
And that's the same for men as well. I mean, 100%. male athletes, their career ends at some point as well. It's And
one of the stark things that really stood out to me a few years ago, we got presented with our Players Association, and it was a heap of statistics, mostly on the men's program, but they said the majority of players that retire don't get a say in it. So whether it be injury, non-selection, family stuff has changed. Not many people actually get the fairy tale finish, and you don't know when your day's done or when you've played your last game. So being prepared right through that, and it's there's one thing being prepared, but I think too it also adds to us being fully functioning adults and athletes as well. If you've got someone who's feeling fulfilled outside of their sport, you're actually going to get the best out of them on the field as well, because they feel really comfortable. Everything's not relying on this game. It is just a game. We're not solving the world's problems or anything like that. This is fun, and this is why we play. I think that's going to be key in this transition period, because we've had so many women come before us, and this is what I'm passionate about as well. We've had so many women come before us that paid to play, that were on the $900 contracts. We want to ensure that all the sacrifices that they made in the lead up to this aren't forgotten, and that we actually know that we've got the opportunity to do this better than how men's sport has transitioned over the years as well.
So how do we close that gap further from someone who knows very little about sport? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I would have thought it's all about sponsors and advertising. So you need to increase people watching, and you need to keep people interested and increase interest in women playing cricket. How do we do that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I think a lot of it's eyeballs. So this year it was really a really welcome announcement, was that all of our games are being televised this summer. So whether it be across KO or across Channel 7, everything's going to be televised, which means quite often we were having games that were only live streamed, but they were the rippers. They were the ones that were the really tight finish, and the ones that the fans really want to be a part of. I think eventually watching sport, and this is just my own opinion, watching sport evolve across America and Australia and all of that, I actually think we're going to have to start to get quite thrifty with sponsorships, broadcast deals, all of that, because the money needs to keep going up, but there's only so much money in the world, and COVID's really thrown a curveball at everyone. So it might be that we've got to think outside the box with the way that sponsorships are allowed to happen, and ownership and all of these sorts of things that start to come into it. I definitely don't have the answers or anything like that, but I think having more sponsors in the game and across women's sport is only just going to lift it. And I think women's sport as a whole has done an incredible job to build the reputation that it's got, in that where I feel like for every it was actually Elise Blarney who said this, if you look at cricket, if you're a young girl out there, there is someone who's like you playing the WBBL. There is someone that you can look up to, regardless of whether you're like Sammy Jo Johnson who loves her cars, or you're a bit of a girly girl like me, or you've got all these different personality traits that are within cricket. And so it's about giving them a platform for these young girls to keep latching onto and keep being invested in, and keep the public invested in as well.
Yeah.
We've got a massive opportunity. That's the really exciting thing, but we've just got to find a way to harness it.
Yeah. And I think this is a narrative that perhaps the media used to push around women in sport, that it was a certain type of female that was interested in sport. Whereas if women feel more represented, and that, you know, there is all different types of women involved in sport, that might help as well.
Exactly. And I think it's reflective of society, isn't it? Like what we're in a workplace essentially, and we just get to have a really fun job. But there is all sorts of people that do all sorts of jobs, and I think the visibility of that is like paramount to the success of the sport. They've already done a really good job of it so far, but I think getting ahead, and I think cricket being the leader across that over a number of years, there's still ways that we can keep evolving and keep shifting and keep on making it better. The T20 World Cup final, I was in tears. I was there in the crowd. Like, it was just insane to think that there was so many people coming to watch a women's sporting event. And for that to be the final event prior to COVID, I think there was a lot of us that were really scared that we've built this momentum and then now it's going to stop. I think with where the world's shifting and how things are starting to slowly return to normal, I think there's been even more so an emphasis on broadcast and being able to show people's personalities, and I guess being able to work in that as well. You start to see the workings of how you can keep the narrative going and keep people invested in people. That's kind of the strength that I think women's sport has, and that's going to be the strength that sponsors can attach themselves to as well, because you've got these really awesome stories, whether it be Jess Duffin in my Renegades team, who's playing AFLW and WBBL and has a bub as well. We've got a little baby on tour, which is just amazing.
Wow.
That's the sort of stuff that people want to invest in.
Yeah. And that's like, as a woman as well, like, I want to see her out, you know, bowling and batting and kicking the footy. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, it's really cool. So I think the more that we can keep pushing forward those stories, I think the more that women's sport's going to keep evolving. And it's not just the positive story, right? Like, the Aussie team has been really good about pushing this and saying, if we're playing rubbish, say it. Like, it's not, we're at a point now where we don't need to have the advocacy the whole time. Treat us the same as the boys.
Yeah, don't sugarcoat it. Yeah.
We're on our game, the media needs to say it. And I think it is starting to get to that point. The Aussies started to see it in that T20 World Cup when they weren't performing. And Elisa Healy was under fire, and she was almost welcoming it, because she was saying, she's like, yep, I'm not playing at my best at the moment.
Yep.
But this is where I think that's kind of the true testament of where women's sport is at, is when you can actually analyze it like you do the boys. And I don't like comparison, but when you treat it the same, the public's going to start to treat it the same. They're seeing it through that same lens.
You're so right, because you wouldn't, as a person in the media, you wouldn't want to be seen as bashing it, because then it's like, oh, well, you don't want to make it out that, you know, that they're not worth the money. We don't worry about, you know, calling out a footy player when he's not performing, because it's not going to make any difference with his paycheck.
No, but the other thing too is that it almost ruins your credibility as a journalist as well. If you were, so let's flip it on its head and say you were to just constantly go, oh, well, how good were the Brisbane Broncos, or how good were the Sydney Swans, and it's okay that this result happened. The public could call you out on it.
Yeah.
They go, no, like, we are invested in this story as well. So the more that tends to happen, I think there's going to be a shift in perspectives in the public. And I mean, we're already seeing it. We've got young boys that come to games and they don't see a difference in the men or the women. That was actually a key comment I had from a mum. I reckon it was 4 years ago, and it was really kind of cool. And she said she brought her son along, and she goes, oh, I think at that time I was playing for the Brisbane Heat. And she said, we're watching the Brisbane Heat women today, and then we're watching the boys tomorrow. And her son doesn't see a difference. Yeah. He doesn't see the gender, which is just insane. So we're getting there.
Yeah.
We've got to keep that going.
Mm. So you mentioned before as well that you do present for Channel 7. So how did that opportunity come about? And I guess, is that how you sort of make up another part of your income? Because, I mean, let's face it, you're not being paid a full-time wage to play cricket. So how did that opportunity present itself?
So studying journalism helps a
Yeah.
little bit. I actually worked in a newsroom for 3 years.
Oh,
I worked
wow.
in a commercial radio newsroom, back home in Brisbane. And that opportunity came up. Again, I was injured.
Yeah.
And I did a commentary gig with a guy who ended up being head of the newsroom eventually. I
Yeah,
got
right.
work experience, and based off what I was able to deliver there, they had a job going and they offered it to me. So I
Wow.
so much on the job there. The pressures of meeting deadlines, as I'm sure you're aware of,
Yeah.
filing 30 seconds before the hour to make sure that the story
Yeah.
makes the news and everything. But yeah, so just from there, I think Channel 7 knew that I had some of those media interests, and over the last couple of years got a couple of gigs when they were in Brisbane.
Yep.
And then probably the big one for me, which I'm really grateful for on multiple levels, was the opportunity to work on the men's test last year.
Yeah.
COVID threw a spanner in the works and they couldn't get the team there. So I got a call 2 days before the test to say, hey, are you free? Can you help us out? And I'm really grateful to Queensland Cricket as well for allowing me to do that, because I said on that same phone call, I said, forgive me for not being super excited, but I do have to check that I'm allowed to miss training for 5 days.
Yeah.
But that kind of really opened my eyes to a whole lot more, and being able to be a part of the coverage with the women's stuff as well. I think me with a journalism background, like I think like it's a funny industry, because you feel like you don't read the game that well, but you get like it was funny. I had one of my teammates say, I never actually thought that you read the game the way that you do, but obviously sometimes I don't say it, and it's weird having that bird's eye perspective on the game, which I think actually helps my playing. Because
I was going to say, do you think it makes you a better player?
Well, when you're playing, you're in the thick of it, you're in the emotion, and it's kind of like right in front of you, you're in the situation, versus when you're outside and you're commentating on it, you can actually see the opportunities a little bit better. So I think it's helping me with my own on-field game as much as, I guess, playing helps the commentating side of things. But yeah, I think for me, being able to be involved in that in the middle of my career, when it's traditionally, I guess, a role that people transition to when they finish. I'm working it when I'm still 25. And I have been for like the last couple of years as well. It's really cool. But I guess for me, I don't see myself sometimes as an expert, but the thing I like to pride myself on is being able to ask good questions. And that's where I think the journalism side comes in a little bit more, and being able to facilitate conversation a little bit more. But no, it's cool to see the other side. It's absolutely wild I got to sit in the producer's truck in one of my commentary breaks and just see what goes into bringing our games to TV.
The broadcast,
because when you're playing, you just go, well, we're broadcasted or we're not broadcasted. Meanwhile, you don't see all the people that actually work on it and what all of their roles are. It's just every athlete should get the opportunity to actually just see behind the scenes, because it's just so cool.
So 5 years from now, you'll have finished your degree. What are your hopes? Where do you hope women's sport is? Where do you hope you are? What are the goals?
I hope women's sport is considered professional, and I would hope, and not just cricket. I hope in the next couple of years cricket is considered professional. But same thing though, still being able to pursue things outside of your sport and being that complete human and treating people as people first, not just an athlete or a commodity. I think, if that can be across all sports as well. So netball's been around for ages and has been the leader for ages. And I think it's quite funny. I've got some mates that are in the Firebirds and stuff like that. And actually, it's so funny when one sport kicks ahead, we're going, great, how good, because our team's going to follow suit. And as much as the teams view each other as competing, the athletes are the ones that are winning, which is really, really cool. For me personally, I hope in 5 years' time I'm still playing. I'll be towards the back end there, but I think, if we're able to have the opportunity to still pursue things outside but still being valued in our own sport, off the field, for me, I'd love to still be involved in broadcast and presenting and picking up little bits and pieces around the place and still being able to do the juggle. I think as much as the juggle can be a bit of a stress at times, we love it. Like, I love being busy, and I love seeing my color-coded Google Calendar completely full, and doing all of the things.
Yeah.
So I think being able to get that nice balance of doing it all, as well. But I think too, there's a lot of work to be done, and cricket's a leader in this. But to see someone like Jess Duffin with her bub on tour, I'd love to see more of that. Like, I think it'd be a really cool thing for women's sport to be able to. You don't have to sacrifice being a mum while being an athlete, and you don't have to sacrifice being an athlete to be a mum. I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space across all women's sports. We're really lucky with the maternity policy that we've got within cricket, that you get a carer on tour until Bub is 4. You've got guaranteed your next contract. It's a really, really cool system. I think over the years, over the next 5 years, I think you can fully expect that there'll be a number of athletes that look to take that up, because as you should. I think being a woman with where the professionalism's going, I nerd out about some of this stuff and really like playing out different timelines. But as a female, so say you finish your degree. So I'm 25. I finished my degree. If I keep playing, and then if I retire, and then when I'm 32, 35, 40, whenever, if I retire and then decide to have a baby, I don't have a job to go to. And I've also been away from my degree for 10 years in that time. So you lose that degree, becomes a bit irrelevant. And then all of a sudden you're starting as a 17-year-old when you're in your 30s. So I think there's ways that we can keep changing that and keep working on that, so that people don't have to sacrifice a part of themselves in pursuit of a different career path or in a different life path.
It shouldn't have to be either or, should it?
No, it shouldn't. And I'm so glad that we've got people like Jess that are breaking that glass ceiling and really showing that you can do both, and that it's not just you do that to retire, or if you want to do that, that's totally fine. If you want to do that and come back, that's totally fine as well. And even in netball, like I love my netball. Laura Geitz, as a prime example, having Bub and coming back. Gretel Buetta, who is absolutely kicking goals. Kim Revalian, like, these are phenomenal women who are coming back and playing even better than what they were before. I think it's really cool. Daisy Pearce, like,
she's incredible.
There's examples in every sport, and I think it'll be cool when that becomes the norm and not just the nice color story.
Realistically, where do you think the pay gap's going to be in 5 years?
I don't think it'll be the same as the men. I think we'll still be having the same chats around how much money is being brought in, but I think though the opportunity to demonstrate how much money the women bring in will be there. I think that's the really hard thing at the moment across all of women's sport, and watching as a spectator who loves it. I think it's really hard. Netball, all the games are ticketed. Cricket's just started to ticketed some games, and sometimes it's not really about the money or how much money you bring in, but it's about showing the value. So if I have to pay $5 to go watch an AFLW game, I'm probably more inclined to go because I've invested that money. And the AFLW has shown that it's worth your money. It's worth your time. You should come. When you make something free, if the weather's not great, you go, I'm not going to go. So you don't have that same level of commitment. I think, I'd love that there's actually other mechanisms that we can demonstrate the value of women's sport. And I think we're already starting to see it in that the Australian women's team was considered the most loved team in Australia the most loved team, full stop. But it was the Australian women's cricket team. And so metrics like that, I think, are really important because it shows the level of relatability and connection with the audience. So I'd love to see that. I think I would love to see all female sports, all team sports, and even individual athletes. I've got a few mates that are Olympians and stuff like that, and some of the riggers and stuff like that they've got to go through in order to just make their way through life is quite, it's a struggle. So I would love to see the likes of your leading sports being on, dare I throw out a number, I'd love to see kind of if you could have the average wage being somewhere around 80 for a domestic player, where the lowest is 60, so they're making a living.
Yeah.
Because the other thing too that sometimes comes into it is they spruik up the numbers by going, oh, well, you get these match payments and whatnot. But again, the lowest paid player isn't going to be playing or won't necessarily play. So that's the person that we've got to keep looking after.
Yeah. Lot to think about and a lot of work to still go in. Hey, we're all about making life simpler and better for women. How do you make your life simpler and better?
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, planning is how I make my life simple. I invest in time, whether it be on a Sunday, although when it's cricket season, Sundays are club cricket time, so I've got to make my Saturday my Sunday. Plan my week, but that's how it's almost like I lock into what I'm doing for the rest of the week. And for times that I'm time poor, having things like macros to be able to have my back and be ready for that. But I think to be more efficient, I've got to invest time in myself and really prioritize that time for myself. And for me to feel on top of things, it's to sit down with my calendar and go through
color-coded calendar.
Exactly. And also being able to map it out, because the thing that I love the most about my life is that I get to do so many different things. It's also the thing that makes my life chaotic, but I've got to make sure though that I'm still prioritizing time with my partner Josh, that I'm still catching up with my friends outside, and it's not just work. So that's how I make my life easier. It's kind of like a return on investment.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of It's All Her, the podcast. If you have loved this episode, please rate, review and subscribe wherever you listen, and I'll be back in your ears soon.